Hey, my name is Jordan Coley, and welcome to my special song meaning series where I unpack the details of the songs from my album, Sparrow and Flower. Just a heads up, all of my songs are written from a Christian perspective since that's who I am, but I've also tried very intentionally to make sure that the way that I approach that isn't divisive. Or at the very least, that's not my intention. So if you're cool with that, awesome. If you're not cool with that, I totally respect you, and honestly, I just hope that you'll choose to stay and listen anyway. But no offense taken if you don't. Olive Press is track 9 on the album, and it's an interesting one because it's another older song that I had sat on for a while. This one didn't undergo the kind of transformation that Target did to make it onto the album, but it honestly almost didn't make the cut anyway because of how musically different it is from the rest of the songs on the album. Looking back, I'm glad that I ended up including it because it's turned out to be some people's favorite song on the entire project. So what is Olive Press about? Before going into the details of the song, let's talk a little bit about an olive press itself. In biblical history, the olive press was both an important agricultural and ceremonial tool, as well as an important source of symbolism. These tools were used to extract oil from olives, which was then used for everything from everyday things like cooking and lighting to religious purposes like anointings and offerings. Ancient Israel's olive presses were a big stone basin where olives were crushed to a pulp by a big, heavy stone wheel. That pulp was then transferred to baskets where more pressure was applied to squeeze out the oil. Because this was hard, labor-intensive work, it provided a culturally significant symbol in biblical literature, most notably in the Garden of Gethsemane, which is Hebrew for oil press. This is where Jesus prays before he himself is crushed and pressed as the ultimate sacrifice on the cross. If you're interested in that story, you can read about it starting in Matthew chapter 26, verse 36. And so, this difficult multi-step process of obtaining an important result is the parallel that I hope to draw with this song. Getting oil from olives takes a lot of time, effort, and intense pressure. Getting the good fruit out of our lives does too. My song Olive Press is about that time, effort, and pressure, and how I navigate one of my personal biggest hurdles, imposter syndrome. For most of my young life, I struggled to find a place to belong. As a light-skinned, black, nerdy kid with a lot of interests and ADHD, which went undiagnosed for most of my young life, things were tough. I never really got all the way into much of anything until high school, and that's kind of for reasons that I mentioned way back in episode 3. As a result, every time I floated between the many friend groups that I was on the fringe of, my connection to any of them always felt paper thin. So I naively tried to conform myself into what others liked instead of what I liked. And honestly, it was just never enough to stop the drift or bring me closer into the circle. I saw myself as a fake, which is the source of the refrain after the first chorus, "Do you see me like I see me?" That was actually the first part of the song that I wrote. The rest of it was built around this big thematic question of asking God and those around me about how they perceive me. The second verse then talks about seeing others, how they figured out who they are, and constantly feeling like I'm playing catch up because I can't land on who I actually am. I had this head knowledge of what I was made to be, but none of the direction or the courage to pursue it. The bridge then talks about how I realized that I've been defining myself by what others think of me instead of what really matters. I describe that feeling as a bruise because, like a bruise, it's a wound that doesn't break the surface, and the hurt that I was navigating at that time, it looked okay from the outside. But beneath it was a lot of pain and suffering. At the end of the song, the very last line signifies the moment where it finally comes to me. It clicks. After all the pain and the challenges that I've gone through in life, I realize that all I have to do is just reframe my initial question. Do you see me like I see me becomes, do I love you like you love me? And all of a sudden, the years of pressure under the olive press of life make sense. And I hope that's the message that you take as well from the song. And that is the long and short of my song, Olive Press. Up next is the final episode where we dive into the album's namesake, Sparrow and Flower. See you then.